So, Patti, I really enjoyed our conversation with Kevin from Retail Cloud. I actually didn't even know that Retail Cloud was going after restaurants, but here they got some of this amazing cutting edge order technology and ticketing and just a bunch of really cool stuff.
Yeah, really cool. In fact, like you, I did not realize they were going after the restaurant vertical until they approached me and said, "Hey, we have this cool QR code technology we're using. Are you interested in talking about it?" And I was really glad. I learned a lot. I know you learned a lot.
Yeah, I did. I did. Tell us about the insiders.
Interchange under attack from federal regulators. And James and I have a pretty long discussion about that, but I think the message is that, it's very possible that regulation could be coming, and there's going to be some changes, I think.
Yeah, and in case you're wondering, like, this is super relevant to you as an individual sales rep or ISO owner or executive. I mean, this is a slippery slope. So this is scary stuff. This is game over industry stuff that we got to keep an eye on, because if this happens the wrong way, it's a big problem. So
and the fact is that let's not forget, the merchants have really large lobbying forces.
Yes.
We need to sort of start channeling, this industry needs to start channeling its resources towards fending off something like this.
Yeah, and at least being aware of it. So and then the questions from the field, I gave some kind of random thoughts today of some ideas that people are just not doing. And so I talk about this reality as we shift as an industry towards integrated payments, verticalization. What's happening is everybody understands that's the direction we're going, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it, especially the individual agents and the ISOs. So I talked today about two things that you can actually do to dramatically increase retention, to partner with your salespeople to really take advantage of the trend. It's like, nobody needs to guess. We all know the direction it's going. So the question is, how are you going to profit from it? And that's what I talk about today, is two ways we can do that. This episode is brought to you by Valor Paytech, really the leader in omni-channel technology for that small to medium merchant out there, and especially as it relates to cash discounting. So processor agnostic, check them out. And by the way, let me mention, they are going to be at all of the shows this year. They are the headline sponsor of every single show. So definitely look them up, get a demo while you're there. Or you can go to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR, ccsalespro.com/VALOR.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Well, everybody, today James and I have lined up an interview with Kevin Calaco. He's the CEO at Retail Cloud. How you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Patti. How about you?
Doing wonderful. Hey, it's March, winter's almost over. Before we get started, Kevin, we always like to, hear about people's journey to this space. How did you get into merchant services, and what led you to start Retail Cloud?
Well, how I got into merchant services is the story from way back when in the 80s. I was in financial industry. I was leading a issuing program, and acquisition, like this new thing happened where acquisition was being taken over by technology.
Right.
And I looked at that and I said, hey, I want to be part of that. It was much more interesting than issuing.
Oh, yeah. I would agree. So you've been at this. I know you founded Retail Cloud, what was around 2008?
Yeah, I founded Retail Cloud in 2008. Before that, I was involved with a company called PayNet Transactions. I left the space for a few years and, decided to look at point of sale and the different things that point of sale was doing, the different things that folks are doing with the cloud. And we founded Retail Cloud, and I've been playing in that space since then.
Well, 2008, 2022, that's a pretty long span. I sometimes like to ask this, try not to make it an open-ended question, but, how much change have you seen over the last 14 years in terms of, the ISO and the processing side of the acquiring arm?
Yeah, it's been quite a ride, because we started out as an enterprise solution, the S&E, the sports and entertainment space, but it's been quite a ride in the time frame. We've seen the race to zero, and that payment space has gone through, and now we've seen the 3.8456, whatever percent that is, with the cash discounting, and the industry obviously has gone through a lot of changes. We've seen incursion of non-traditional payment partners, like Square and Shopify. We've always set out to build a payment agnostic company, and that's kind of what we've stayed true with. We understand the payment space. We're not in the payment space because we value our relationship with our partners, not because we don't understand the payment space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So totally.
Yeah. So, as we talk about technology, and of course the title today and the topic really is how do we leverage technology to help merchants? And of course, Retail Cloud has been at the forefront there for a long time. Talk about QR codes a little bit. Patty and I were both impressed with the way that your company leverages QR codes for ordering and things like that. And I know it's interesting. It's a hot technology, but it's also kind of an older technology, but it's one that a lot of consumers have embraced. So talk about how you're leveraging QR codes.
Yeah. So, James, I got to apologize because I can't do a short answer, but I'll try to be short here.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
At least try for an elevator pitch,
Yeah. Well, QR codes have gone through an interesting transition. If you remember in the old days when you wanted to order online, you'd open that kitchen drawer, find the menus, and then figure out what you wanted and then call. That's how QR codes are today. You scan a QR code, you get a menu, you use your 2 fingers to make that screen larger, and then you wait for the server. The evolution of QR codes is the same thing as the evolution of online ordering. Smart QR codes can allow a guest to scan a QR code and immediately connect it to the kitchen, connect it to the expediter, connect to the server, place an order, do modifies, do a whole lot more than what they're doing today. The pandemic has accelerated that conversion for merchants and for diners, because now they're willing to take, and they want to actually take more control of the entire order experience.
Yeah. And again, if I can just sort of follow up on that, you talk about smart QR codes, and I'm wondering if you can explain for our audience and to me, what is a smart QR code and how does it differ from a traditional QR code?
Well, a traditional QR code is sort of what I was talking about earlier, the opening the kitchen drawer and pulling out the menu. The traditional QR code does is it displays a menu.
Okay.
The smart QR code is meant to do a whole lot more. It's really meant to leverage the technology of connecting you to the restaurant and allowing you to engage with the server. You want a glass of water, you don't have to wait. You can just do that through that smart QR code. You want to order another round of drinks? That's simple.
Yeah. I like it. So this is, as I understand it, is what your product that you call Ticket. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes.
TIKT, Ticket. I'm getting the sense that this was an outgrowth of some of your earlier technological innovations. And maybe you can sort of speak to what Ticket does and, how it interacts with the back. I mean, that's basically what you're talking about, right? It's a smart QR code solution.
Correct. Yeah. Ticket is basically an order management and fulfillment process.
Okay.
It's the same. It is built on the rails of the same product that we use for online and online fulfillment. It's also built on the same rails that pro teams like the Seattle Kraken are using for the in-seat ordering. It allows a guest to connect to the restaurants, to a printer in the restaurant, to the KDS in the restaurant, to the server directly using apps that they can download on their devices or on their phones. And it allows them to do all this without changing their current POS system. And that's really a big key because most people love their POS systems.
Right. Excuse me. And it strikes me, and we've talked about this with several other guests in the past, with all of the staff shortages, particularly in restaurants. This must be a really great response to that, right? And also, I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on sort of what the consumer reaction has been. What's been your experience with your restaurant clients as well as their customers?
Yeah, the restaurant clients love it because it really allows them to address the staffing shortage that they all face. Not just in the front of the house, but also in the back of the house.
Right.
Consumers love it because they're able to take that entire dining experience in their own hands. I mean, they can place orders. They don't have to check out after every order. They can place multiple orders. I do this all the time. I forget to order the roasted Brussels sprouts, and then I see someone walking by, and I wish I had done that. Now it's very easy for me to do that. Right. Restaurants also love it because it creates a lift in the average ticket. Servers love it because we have seen an increase in tips as well.
Can you quantify that at all?
Yeah, we're seeing a 9 to 14% increase in average ticket. That's the typical lift. We're seeing it started out at 9. It's now getting in the 11 to 12% range on average ticket size in restaurants.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and servers, we don't really have a lot of data on what tips were ahead of before.
Yeah, sure.
So I can't quantify that, but other people who have quantified it say that increase is anywhere from 12 to 18% above the previous tip level.
And with less work, really, right? Because then,
Yes.
one of the things I always hate about being in a restaurant is getting the server's attention so I can get that other soda or the bread or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And servers become concierges, basically. They become ambassadors for the restaurant
Right.
in creating a great experience. So you're seeing a lot of return visits. And with Ticket, one of the things that we recently introduced was a concept called preference, recency, frequency, and monetary. We call it PRFM. Within the server app, they can see what the guest preferences are based upon their history. They can see when they're last visited, how many times they visit, what the total value of their spend is. It really allows them to tailor experiences, what their allergies are. It allows
Really?
them to
Now that's very cool. Yeah, right.
So it allows them to tailor experiences for guests. Guest comes in, they always want to sit outside. That you can say what they see inside. Would you like me to let you know if an outside table opens up?
Right.
Now, so I want to dig into this a little bit more. You mentioned something earlier that I actually wasn't aware of. You were saying that Ticket is, in some ways POS agnostic, meaning, they don't have to switch point of sale systems. Talk to me about that a little bit more. Are you saying that Ticket is actually like integrated into other point of sale systems? Or are you saying somehow it operates outside of that? Or what do you mean by that exactly?
Ticket operates outside the existing POS system. It's a direct connection to the printer or the KDS system or an app that can run on the Expediter unit. Other POS systems, we're currently working on integrations into 2 other POS systems besides ours, and we have others that are queued up, where they are also able to make calls into Ticket and get all the order information for reporting purposes. They can also get their full reporting on our system, on our backend system as well.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because again, to me, I'm trying to picture how that would be. That sounds almost, in some ways, I could see how that could be a little challenging to explain to the restaurant owner, because of course they probably already have a kitchen printer that's printing from the point of sale system. So how does this work? So let's say I'm a patron, I'm sitting at the table. I'm like, okay, I want to add, a side of shrimp or something like that. And the merchant currently is using, say, Aldello or something like that. What does this flow look like? How does this end up? Because at some point it does have to make it into the point of sale for the final order. So tell me more about how that would actually work.
So the first thing we do is we swap out that printer for a cloud-based printer.
Okay.
So it allows us to communicate to that printer via the cloud. Okay. Most restaurant management systems can also support a cloud-based printer. So they would also talk to that printer via the cloud. So that's the first thing we do. Now, we are not reporting today into companies like Aldello, but we make a API call available to them if they want to make that call into the system and pull that data. Not unlike what the restaurants did with Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub. Their delivery systems, they give them a device that they can get that data on, or the POS can make a call and pull that data.
Sure. Okay. And so now one thing I think that would be really crucial for our audience to understand, though, I would imagine that in that particular scenario, the payment processing then would not be running through Ticket there, right? The server, somebody would be, like in this case, manually entering it or using the API call, but they'd be bringing the data into the point of sale, but then the payment processing would still be running through the point of sale with the original payment processor.
So James, that's a great question, because Ticket is payment process agnostic. So whether they're making the payment on the customer device or they're making it into a POS, the agent gets to decide who they want to use, which processor they want to use. So we support 120 different gateways today.
Okay.
So if that processor has a connection into the gateway, they're using their own merchant account. We're continuing to remain process agnostic on this.
Sure. I understand. I think, I got it. I think that's really interesting. Okay.
But actually help me for a second, because I'm still a little bit unclear on this, if you don't mind. So basically you're saying you have to have some sort of API that will link the orders that are in ticket to the POS so that the sale can be rung up?
No, if you want your data to show up in the POS reporting system, the POS system would have an API. If you want to just have the data showing up as it normally does on the back end, then we provide all that reporting to you, both on phone apps as well as on tablets, as well as on the console.
Okay.
On a back office. So we have multiple forms of reporting that are available to the merchant. It's just that if they say specifically, I have a POS and I wanted to show up in my POS, like we have our roadmap in the first quarter of this year to release integrations into Clover and SkyTab, where that information will be available on those devices.
Right, which makes sense since those are it seems like you're definitely going to go after the point of sale systems that are more in the ISO agent space
domain. Yeah.
So, I like that.
Can I also just throw in a question? I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can, I've been wrong before, but I thought I saw on your website an ROI calculator. Is that something that ISOs and agents are using with their clients?
Yes, the ROI calculator is pretty interesting because it considers the lift in sales. It considers the elimination of comps and order errors, and it also considers the savings in labor. So an ISO can go in and they can put in a restaurant's name, put in the owner's email address, put in their email address, and hit calculate, and it will generate a email to the merchant as well as to the ISO.
Love it. So
that's really cool.
We've been kind of tiptoeing around the ISO agent model quite a bit here. So let's talk about that. So what's the rationale for the ISO and agent? They're out there in the field, they're running across restaurants. They want point of sale solutions that they can offer. Talk to us about what's in it for the ISO and agent, and maybe even also touch on cash discounting, since that's a really hot topic as well, and how that's, is that something that sounds like you've got that integrated and set up to work well within your system also?
Yeah, so here's what we have integrated into our system. We have the ability to add a fee into our system, whether it is a convenience fee, whether it is a fee for
non-cash adjustment,
right. Whether it's, or it could even be a fee. For example, in San Francisco, most restaurants have a health and benefit fee. So, and you can have multiple fees show up in the same invoice as well. So the ability to put in any kind of fee that the merchant wants exists today. We're assuming we're not taking the issue of compliance doesn't fall on us. It's going to be on the merchant, make sure they're compliant.
Sure.
But they can add any fee that they want. From an ISO agent perspective, it's a way for them to do one of two things. I'm sure by now every agent knows about the DoorDash acquisition of Bbot. So it allows them, one, to secure their current processing base, to make sure, because no agent all of a sudden wants to take the 37% cut. I won't talk about how I got that number, but the residual value. But secondly, it also allows them to go after business that they have solicited before, where the merchant says, look, I don't want to change my POS system. You don't have to change your POS system. This is a better ordering and fulfillment system that allows your service to make more, that allows you to sell more, and you don't need to change it.
Yeah, cool.
So it's still residual driven, and they also have the ability to mark up ticket fees.
Sure.
So is it like a monthly fee, or is it a device fee? How does that go?
We give each agent the ability to set their own path. They get to pick one of three programs. They can either go with a flat monthly fee, but some of our partners prefer to go with a no monthly fee, but a percentage fee on the ticket sale. So we allow them to go whichever way they want to go on that.
Okay, cool. Now,
we also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, because we're doing a 90-day free trial for every merchant that comes on, ISOs are typically gravitating to the no monthly fee so that they can just sort of have the merchant kick the tires without any cost whatsoever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Now, I know I wanted to, zero in on ticket for this interview, but when I was doing some research on your company, I also came upon another technology that I thought was really cool, and I just was hoping you could touch on it really briefly. And that's the RFID checkout system for sporting venues. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. Again, one of the things that I feel is just probably the most impressive thing about us, if I could say that, is the pioneering work that our research and development team has done in order management. That RFID solution, which allows a fan to walk around the stadium, put things in their bags, then take their bag and drop it in a box that is read by an RFID reader that immediately rings it up on the sale.
That's so cool.
It is really cool. I mean, when we first put this in, the New York Islanders, they tested it on 6 POS machines that were run by one cashier. I mean, it was a massive reduction in staff. And that whole RFID technology spread everywhere, not just in stadiums, but even in regular stores.
Yeah. And just when you did that example, it made me chuckle because when I was in college, one of the ways I made money was by selling food at sporting events.
Yeah.
And back in the old days, they would like load up your chest, and they'd say, okay, this chest is $50 worth of food. Whatever you make over 50 is yours. Things have come a long way since the 1970s.
Yeah. That's so. I want to clarify that a bit because I mean that's actually a pretty amazing thing there. I mean, if I'm understanding what you just said, I mean this is kind of similar to some of these Amazon.
I was thinking the same thing.
Stores, right, where this kind of self-checkout concept, but this is something that's for ISOs and agents that they can resell to their merchants. I mean, I'm sure you've done a lot of research on Amazon. I mean, how does yours, kind of system stack up there? Is there some similarities? Is there some big differences as far as the way Amazon's trying to kind of fully automate this
Amazon
checkout
Go
process?
Stores or whatever they call it.
Yeah, the Amazon Go stores. So it's pretty interesting. Amazon works off a planogram typically, in that and they don't require any RFID tagging on their product.
Okay.
They're doing recognition of the packaged goods, and I'm overly simplifying their technology.
Of course.
Right.
And we work off an RFID chip because what we are doing is not just at the checkout. We also want to do the whole cycle of warehouse management. Because if you have someone with 100,000 pieces in the warehouse, you literally walk around with the scanner and wave it as you walk down the aisles, and you've done your inventory count. We're also trying to do cycle count validation. So we've kind of, because we play these solutions are primarily meant for retail, we've really tried to deal with the whole inventory management piece as well.
So does that mean it has to be sort of a scenario where there isn't like thousands of SKUs, or would it still work in that kind of situation?
It would still work in that kind of. We did a test with a customer who had 50,000 SKUs, and they probably had 800,000 items, and it took, I think, maybe 6 minutes to count the whole warehouse.
Wow.
It was basically as long as they took them to walk
up and down the aisles, right?
And they had two people walking down the aisles. One started from the north, one started from the south, and they just zigzag through the whole thing. And then we take that data, we clean it up, so we remove all the duplicates and then the counts.
So we'll have to do a follow-up podcast at some point talking about this more.
Yeah, I'd like to do that some more.
But just one last question on this, because I honestly don't even know the answer to this. I probably should. But when you say an RFID, what is that? I mean, it sounds like you're saying it's some kind of smart tagging that's on the product.
It's a smart tagging. They're printed on Zebra tag printers. They're low cost. It's a low-cost delivery system of a smart tag. I'm going to start using that, by the way. Smart QRC and smart tagging.
Hey, there, I like it. It's good. So you got your restaurant and your retail covered with a smart concept.
I'll credit you. I'll say. Okay. So when someone interviews me and say, "How'd you come up with this?" I'll go, "Well, James."
It'll say next time. It'll say, he'll be saying it's a smart tag, trademark pending, and so, I like it. So good stuff. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, this has been really good stuff. I really enjoyed it, Kevin. I'm sure there's folks out there that are going to want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing over at Retail Cloud. Maybe some of your other tech offerings, or certainly to talk more about the ticket and the RFID thing. Where would you send them?
I would send them to either retailcloud.com or just send an email to our sales team at sales@retailcloud.com.
Okay.
And they will give you all the information you want plus.
Excellent. And that's retailcloud.com, all one word, retail.
All one word. Yep, retailcloud.com.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I know I came away learning some new stuff.
Yeah.
I think James did too.
Good stuff.
And I look forward to chatting with you in the future. I think you have some interesting things going on. Well, folks, by this time, I'm sure you know that our podcast is sponsored by Valor Paytech, the leader in omni-channel solutions. You know, one of the reasons James and I really like Valor Paytech is that they check all the boxes. Don't you agree, James?
They absolutely do. You know, boxes like cash discounting.
Check.
Smart terminals.
Check.
Virtual terminals.
Check.
Standalone terminals.
Check.
Omni-channel.
Check.
Processor agnostic.
Check.
Text invoices.
Check.
Email invoices.
Check.
Customer feedback.
Check.
And I think you get the idea. We could go on for quite some time with more and more boxes.
But
Patti and I thought of that little idea we wanted to share with you because we really do love our sponsor, Valor Paytech. We believe in them. There's a reason that we have them as our sponsor. Go to ccsalesforce.com/Valor. If you get value from these podcasts and you enjoy listening to them, as I know many of you do on a regular basis, we appreciate you. And in return, we have a very small favor to ask. Go to ccsalesforce.com/VALOR, or even better, if you're going to be going to the ETA, the NEAA, the MWAA, the Southeastern Acquirers, look them up. It's not hard to look them up because they have the biggest booth and they're the sponsor of all of these events. So look them up for sure.
Hey, and if I can just throw in a little ad, I will be at the NEAA. So if you have any questions from the field, be sure to stop me and I'll bring them back to James.
Nice. Thanks, Patti.
And now, here is Questions from the Field with James Shepard.
Patti, today in Questions from the Field, I want to talk about a very interesting question. This is really more my question, I guess, than it is the agent's question. But I'm noticing a bit of a challenge as I'm dealing with ISOs in this kind of changing payments landscape. And the challenge I'm facing is the reality of the independent sales representative and how to get them going. And then the other reality of the fact that payments are changing more to integrated payments. And so to be really specific here, what I'm saying is when I talk to everybody and I say, hey, how important do you think it's going to be that 5 years from now, the vast majority of your portfolio has integrated payments with some kind of point of sale system or, software of some kind? And, the executives are saying it's the most important thing. And then I'm saying, okay, how are you training your sales representatives to sell integrated payments? And they're all saying, well, it's hard. It's like, well, yeah. So, but you got to figure it out, So I have two thoughts here that I just want to kind of throw out there. And, I'm throwing it out into the ether to see if anybody picks up on it and maybe can use this idea to make some money. So I have two ideas. Okay. Number one, what about, no matter what size your ISO is, if you've got any kind of sales reps out in the field, what about hiring one or more farmers? Okay. And so anybody that understands sales, you understand that there's hunters and farmers. Hunters are what we would consider the typical merchant services sales representative. They go out in the field, they try to make a sale, right? They're hunting. And these hunters typically want something simple to sell because they're just trying to get a yes. So they don't want something big and complicated. But then you have this whole other, group of farmers, these types of agents that are really good at taking an existing relationship, developing that relationship into something more. Well, I really believe that there's a place at most of these processing companies, and again, I'm talking about even smaller ISOs, all the way up to the largest, FSPs and everything. There's a place here to hire W-2 farmers. They get paid some commission, some salary, and where there's a relationship between them and this independent agent in terms of compensation. Now, again, the challenge here is, well, this agent made a sale and they sold a standalone terminal and they're getting, this residual percentage. So as a company, we're only getting X percent. Well, if we hire a farmer to go sell that person a point of sale system, what are we going to pay the farmer? And I think what's missing here is we're missing the effects of attrition on this financial model. it's not just about what you would gain by having the farmer. It's about what you wouldn't lose.
Right.
And a lot of times selling these software solutions comes with software fees and hardware fees. So the idea here would be that you look at to the agent, if I'm an agent, right, and I'm selling merchant services today, I also understand that I am a somewhat of a dinosaur here in terms of technology. Like I'm still putting these standalone terminals out, and I realize that every time I sell a standalone terminal, that merchant is going to switch devices in the next 36 months, whether it's with me or somebody else. I realize that's going to happen.
Right.
So what I would prefer is if my processing company would come in behind me and upsell my merchant to better technology. And as long as I'm going to maybe get a little spiff, or at least I'm going to keep my exact same residual. So in other words, this isn't costing me anything, but it's dramatically increasing my retention.
Right. And retention is the name of the game.
It is. And again, I think even short term, I think with things like, equipment leases, which have got a bad rap in the past, and, whether it's a rental or whatever, but the idea of equipment and software as a service, I'm not talking about the terminal here, although I think that's fine. I'm talking about the point of sale system. I'm talking about the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 purchase that's financed over a period of time using some kind of software as a service or whatever. There's real money to be made in this.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so for the processor to come in, I think you could, I know you could have done the models, but you could justify that W-2, that 50, 60,000 a year plus base, plus commission person. And they get that 50, 60,000 a year, plus they get a small commission off of the software and hardware that they're selling. Right. And now they're making things a lot better. So I think that's a really, really good idea. And it should be explored. The other one is this idea that as salespeople get better, and you got that salesperson, they're selling 10, 15 a month. They're good at what they do. Bringing them in and saying, hey, we would like to partner with you to go after self-storage units in your area. We would like to partner with you to go after pizza shops, to go after hair salons, picking a vertical, bringing that person in and saying, let's form a joint venture of some kind here as a processing company. You're going to get your residual. It's going to be maybe a little less than you normally would because the processor is going to leverage their marketing team, right, to market this and to promote this brand in the local market and to generate leads for the salesperson. They're going to have some
when
people,
possible.
Yes. They're going to have some training. They're going to have, understanding that the salesperson, again, if you have somebody that's capable of doing this, well, they don't have the resources to do it. They may have the skills, but they don't have the resources, meaning they may even have the money, but they don't have the ability or the skill or the inclination to manage a team of people and have a developer and have a marketing team and all that. But as the processing company, the large ISO, you probably do have all of those resources and you have the ability to organize it. So what about bringing these people in and saying, okay, you got your first 60 deals under your belt. Is there a certain vertical that you really like? Is there a certain opportunity that you want to go after? Okay, let's form a joint venture. We're going to help you attack that vertical. And so the idea is we know how this is going to play out. Everybody knows.
Right. Sure.
Not a secret. Like, is there anybody listening right now that doesn't understand that payments is becoming verticalized and that it's becoming integrated? Like, I think we all know this.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what are we doing about it? And I think the two things that we could do or that we should explore, depending on your organization and all of that, and what I'm exploring with my consulting clients is, number one, let's create our room of farmers to farm our existing accounts and make them more profitable and make them higher retention. And then number two, let's think about forming partnerships with slightly lower residual splits with the agents, but justifying the investment in infrastructure to take your agents. If you're listening and you got a big ISO, you know what I'm talking about. You have 10 or 15 agents that you're friendly with. They know you, they trust you, you trust them. They've got 15, 20,000 a month residual. Like, you know what I'm talking about. They have the skill to do this. Why don't you help them make the pivot before they really do become a dinosaur and they start losing their portfolio at 30% a year as everybody's switching to integrated payments? Why don't you help them go ahead and make that switch, help them focus on one vertical, get them trained, get them the resources they need. So again, some random ideas today. I know that these are crazy ideas that like nobody's doing, but hopefully somebody will listen to this and say, maybe I'll explore this.
That's an idea to explore.
Yeah.
Good stuff, James. Thanks.
Thanks, Patti.
This is the Insider's Report with Patti Murphy.
So, James, you may recall, and our audience may recall, that I reported recently on a planned advertising blitz by retailers hoping to stave off interchange hikes, right?
Oh, right. Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, I live in the DC. I mean, I don't live in DC, but I get the DC television channel, shall we say?
Sure.
Close enough. And I haven't seen any of those ads yet. But what I did see and what really piqued my interest was a interview with Rohit Chopra. He's the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Okay.
An interview they did on Closing Bell on CNBC.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, I know you watch that as well as me.
Yes.
We're always into these things, but
sure.
So he was asked what the Bureau can do to protect consumers better in this time of growing inflation. And part of his answer was directed right at Mastercard and Visa.
Really?
He said, quote, I was going to share the clip with everybody, but it's a little bit too much back and forth. So I took out the most important
the salient
quote.
details. Sure.
Right. He said, I don't think we have a competitive payment system in this country. We're far behind many other countries. He says he's especially troubled by reports that many interchange rates might go up in April. I mean, again, we're still not totally aware of what Visa and MasterCard are planning, but he said, quote, at a time of inflation, that just seems like adding insult to injury for many small businesses. And then he added that, of course, many businesses can't survive, but they don't accept Visa and MasterCard, so they kind of have them over a barrel.
Right.
So the interviewers pressed him on whether there's anything the government can do to intervene. And he said, quote, when prices rise in tandem by dominant firms, that always raises red flags for regulators.
Yeah.
That's something you and I have talked about in the past.
Well, I'm hearing, so first of all, did you see the story about Visa coming out and saying that they're going to potentially do a 10% decrease?
Well, yeah, and I think I reported on that actually.
That's right. Yeah. So you already have that coming potentially. Now I don't know. Right. I haven't seen the final version. We don't know if it's
for real or not, but yeah.
Right. I have a feeling they're going to monkey with something else to offset or whatever. But at any rate, they've talked about that. And then I just saw a story a couple of days ago that was a bit concerning. Actually, I mean, it was about regulation and that apparently there's talks active right now in Congress about regulating credit card interchange as well as debit, with the Durbin Amendment, and kind of a extension of the Durbin Amendment and things of that nature.
And in fact, there was a editorial in The Hill, which is a newspaper that, well, it's online now, but it was a newspaper that went out mostly to people in Washington, and somebody did a editorial saying that's the worst idea possible. Don't dare do this. Which when I see people doing that made me sit up and take notice. And then I saw Chopra say this. It was like, I think there's some mumblings in Washington that could I really do pose some real problems for Visa and MasterCard.
And again, for our audience to understand the implication here, so here's what happens, right? So let's say that, new regulation comes out slashing the cost of interchange. Well, that's going to be a big win for Walmart and Amazon and, all of the large corporations.
Sure.
The small mom and pop shops that are, currently with Square or whoever else, Stripe, or with any of you, they may or may not see those savings depending on the pricing structure that you have them on.
Right.
And so what we could potentially be looking at here is, as Congress realizes that these savings are not making their way to the merchant, well, who are they going to regulate next? Well, they're going to regulate ISOs and processors and acquiring banks. And so it's one of these things where I'm always torn about this issue, Patti, because I do believe that Visa and MasterCard are engaged in what amounts to collusion for almost monopoly and definitely anti-competitive practices that should be checked. But I'm a little worried about the slippery slope that exists. And I wish that they would take note and make some changes on their own to keep this regulation from being necessary. I really wish they would.
Keep this from being necessary, because it shouldn't go down to the ISOs and the acquirers. And on the same token, we both know that I'm a little bit further left along the political spectrum than you are.
Right.
But I lived through price controls back in the 70s.
Okay.
And that's basically what we're talking about here, is price
right,
controls.
right.
And, you know, when Nixon instituted price controls back in the early 70s during the spiraling inflation that accompanied the war, it was supposed to bring down inflation, and it practically doubled inflation. So there's no economic sense, in my mind, to any kind of federal price controlling. And, you know, but on the other hand, I see where these lawmakers are coming from. They have all these people complaining. They have, you know, separate constituencies, the banks, the retailers, and the consumers. And how do they juggle it and satisfy all those constituencies?
Yeah. And, you know, and what I would love to see as an interesting, you know, first step would be just a, you know, kind of a Freedom and Transparency in Payments Act. There's a good name for a law.
Isn't that a great idea? Yeah. You know?
And so to me, the idea of, hey, let's forget about all this. You know, to me, surcharging, cash discounting, call it whatever you want, do whatever you want. Let's open it up to the free market, and let's see what the free market can do with this. Because, you know, again, a lot of these larger companies that are now starting to be interested in cash discounting, the only real barrier now to these programs taking off at that level is all of these kind of ambiguous laws and restrictions and all of this. And the courts have already ruled that it's a violation of free speech. And so I would love to see Congress take action at the federal level and just say, look, from a federal level, you know, merchants can price however they want relative to the form of payment. If they want to encourage it, if they want to discourage it, if they want to take more cash, less cash, more cards, less cards, we don't care. Do whatever you want, and let's let the free market decide. And then the transparency that says, the card brands have to, I've been a big proponent of this for a long time. I think the card brand should have to send the interchange rate information back with the authorization code.
Yeah.
And I
agree.
think that,
I think that would be a very helpful.
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, I was thinking about this when I was, you know, watching the CNBC clip. And, you know, it struck me that, you know, okay, as a merchant, being able to, you know, manage your cash flow becomes difficult when you don't know what interchange you're paying on each transaction.
Exactly.
Which in my mind is all the more reason for one flat rate, a la cash discounting.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'll tell you what, you know, to me, what would be in my opinion, the ideal solution here, okay, would be, imagine if we could do, and again, I know a lot of people are going to say this is a horrible idea. To be clear, I'm not saying this is what I want to do today. I'm just saying where I would love to see this end up.
Just saying that this is a possibility. Yes. This is just an idea.
What would be interesting to me is something like an interchange plus cash discounting program or surcharge program. So the idea would be, if Visa and Mastercard were required to send interchange rate information through with the authorization code, then the terminal could take that, add 100 basis points, and literally pass that through to the consumer to say, this is your, like, literally on the receipt, this is the rate that we had to pay plus our processing fee, and literally give that level of transparency. And I think what would happen is, I think, you know, consumers would start to become much more aware of this. Businesses would become aware. And I think there'd be a whole kind of generation of technology that would be developed around this concept of, oh, wow, we actually now know how much this transaction really does cost. Well, now we can use that information to do various different things. And again, what those would be, I don't even know right now, but I'm sure the entrepreneurs and innovators would come in and figure something out. But I think that transparency, coupled with a complete freedom of speech on pricing, those two things together, I think would be all that, to me, that's the ideal scenario, to where then let's let the free market decide. Whatever it's going to build, it's going to build. Whatever business owners want, they're going to want. Whatever people are going to develop, they're going to develop. But let's just say there's freedom of speech and there's transparency in the data, and then let the chips fall where they fall. And I don't think any regulation would be needed at that point.
I think you're right. I think when you couple that also, when you couple something like that with the emergence of real-time payments.
Exactly.
You know,
right. Well, which of course we you know, in this context we have.
Right.
You know what I mean? Credit and debit, we have real-time payments relative to what the consumer is experiencing.
Right, relative to the consumer. But for the merchant, there's still a lot of friction.
You know? Agreed.
And I think that's where it comes in. You know, you know, when you and there are, we've talked about it before. There are several of these, you know, innovations that are emerging in the market right now. And I think that some of it is making Visa and MasterCard nervous.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, so
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. I watch, the stocks all the time, and Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, they've all been taking hits lately.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot of growing kind of
Those growing
uncertainty.
pains, like the legacy people are, the new investors are sort of looking at the legacy players and saying, this just doesn't seem to be working right,
Right. Well, or that it's almost working too well as far as from a profitability perspective that I mean, again, regulation would be a body blow to Visa and MasterCard.
Sure
It would be
Sure
massive. And these investors have a clear idea. I mean, they can look around the world and see exactly how this played out for all the players.
Right.
And so they know exactly the worst case scenario. They know exactly what that looks like. So they're able to calculate that into their ROIs. They're thinking about making an investment.
Yeah.
So good stuff, Patti.
Yeah,
Very good.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.